Make a new document. In this case, it's going to be letter sized. And really, you need just one artboard. I'm sorry, I got 3 artboards. Do each one of these on their own separate document. You're going to turn in 2 different Illustrator files, so 1 artboard for each. Remember, all of our graphing tools are found right here in our toolbox, and you've got a variety of different ones to work from. So we did the column and the bar graphs last time. You've also got line graphs and area graphs. The reason why I'm only showing you the column and the pie chart is because both of these work a little bit different. All of the other ones, if you can figure out how to use both of these, then you can figure out how to use the rest of them. Next week we're going to be talking about mapping and how do you map out certain things, and we won't be using these as well. But I'm going to use the pie graph tool for this one. Pie graph, everybody's done a pie graph before, right? You probably in math, probably in a statistics type class. So with this one, as with the other one, if you click once, you can tell it what size do you want it to be. In our case, we're just going to keep it a 7 by 7. And the data that I'm giving you is nothing special. I'm just kind of giving you some random numbers that look good on here. But for these, let's see, I think it was 25, 100, yeah, 150, and 50, and 30. Oops. And 30. Okay, here's the next thing to consider. Notice how I typed these in there, going up and down. If I was to click my apply button, this is what I get. Not exactly what I want, right? How do I want this to look? How does a pie graph? Like one pie graph, like pieces of pie, not several different sizes. If you accidentally type your figures in the column as it is, or the individual rows, if you need to swap it, you can transpose right here, and that will swap everything to here. Now with them going across here, when I click check, this is what I get. This is closer to what I want. Illustrator transpose is this button right here. We'll swap it back and forth from there. Illustrator does all of the work as far as figuring out what the percentages it should be and what the angles are. You don't have to do any of that. But we'll say OK and check that off as well. Once I've got it typed in, we're good to go. Let me move it back onto my page so we can work with it. If I need to make adjustments to this, what do I do? How do I bring up my pie adjustments? Do y'all remember? Control click. Control click on it. And which one do we choose? Type. Under type, this will bring up all of our other information. Now the reason this comes up is because Illustrator calls this a live graph. In other words, it's something that I can change. If I wanted to, I can bring up my data and I can change my data. I can bring up the design and change up the design. However, what we're going to do, once we create the graph how we want it, and I know I don't want to make any changes, we're going to ungroup everything. And if I did this, so I've got it selected, and I go to Object and Ungroup. Remember, grouping is a way of keeping everything together. I get this error when I ungroup it. Hey, the selected graph, after it's ungrouped, you'll no longer be able to access the graph style. In other words, once you do this, you can't access the data. It's no longer a live graph. So when I say yes, now it's just a regular object. And they're still grouped together, so actually I need to ungroup everything again so I can access the individual pieces and break them apart. Cool? Okay. Excuse me. For this particular graph, I'm going to make it a little bit more special. Rather than having a piece of pie, I'm going to cut out the center of it. We're just going to make it a little bit more. So I'm going to select these. I'm going to turn off the stroke. So get rid of our stroke, and let's give each wedge just a different color. Simple, simple stuff. All I'm doing is selecting each wedge, giving it a predefined color. And purple. Darker purple. Cool. There we go. If I want to cut out the center, easiest thing you can do is use your ellipse tool. To draw from the center, if y'all don't remember, you can hold down your Option key. If I normally just click and drag, this is what I get. It goes from the edge outward. If I hold down my Option key, I'll get a circle from the center point. Hold down my Shift key and I get a perfect circle. So that's how I can get it directly in the center, directly from the circle. Now I need to take out that center part. We've got our shape builder tool. We used this last semester. If I select everything, I can hold down Option and erase away these different parts. Pretty cool. Nothing we haven't done before. Option, erases, and then click that away. Now when I select them, I've got all my individual pieces cut apart, and it looks just like that. All right, here's the next fun thing. So I'm going to just rotate this around and know how it would look. What I want to do, we'll go back to my example that we have. I want to be able to see behind some of these. So I need to lower the opacity of all of the objects. So with this, I need to select all of them, and under my transparency palette, dropping it about 85% is good to go. So it doesn't look too different, but now once they overlap each other, you can see that behind each one of them again. Here comes the fun part. So here's the filter that we're going to use. Illustrator has a three-dimensional filter that allows you to take an object and make it look three-dimensional. Now it's not going to be a true three-dimensional, but it's going to do its best to set it up. If I select all of them, excuse me, go up to Effect, under 3D, the one we're going to use is Extrude and Bevel. This is going to take our flat objects and allow us to extrude it, expand them out, and bevel the edges of them as necessary. This is what our options box looks like. If yours comes up, it will probably look more like this, just half of it. If you want more options, this will get into the lighting and everything. You can click the more options down at the bottom. I'm going to keep it very, very simple. If you turn on preview, this will show you what it looks like. And so this is what our objects tend to look like. You can see there's the extrude. It's getting a little bit of depth. I can click anywhere on this cube and be able to rotate and expand or show you where our pieces are. Notice what happens when I rotate these. What's going on? They're all twisting, but they're not staying together. It's not a perfect perfect form, solid form. In other words, they're all independently twisting up. Here's why that's happening. Remember, each one of these is ungrouped, right? So they're all independent of one another. I'm going to hit cancel. This time, if I group them together, object and group, group. There we go. Now they're all one piece. When I go to my 3D distortion, watch what happens. Now they're all moving together as one. You can rotate that up, and they're all stick together. Pretty cool? Very, very cool. So I can work within those. Play around with your axis. So now I can actually take it, I can rotate it around if necessary. I can turn it one way or the other. I can see exactly how it is. And it will take a little bit of time to render each one of those. If I want to make it deeper, if I wanted the depth of this to be a little bit more, here's our extrude depth. If I increase that number, the depth of it also increases as well. Same way if you get it a little bit smaller. About 50 points is good enough to work in. Oh, come on, 50. There we go. There we go. If I wanted to change up the lighting of it, so if I wanted it to be lighter on the top or lighter around here at the front, this is where our more options, I can click the lighting path, and you can see if I move it around to this front, now this edge is becoming a lot more lighter. If I wanted the top to be more lit, I can move this to the top, and now it's brighter up at the top as well. Sometimes you may want to do that in order to see the colors a little bit better. You can play around with how intense your light is or how intense your highlights are by changing up these numbers. So if I wanted my darks to be darker, now they're staying up a little bit dark. Looks really good for that one. Here's the last thing you can play around with, the bevel side of this. By default, none simply keeps the edges at a nice crisp edge. However, you've got some different kinds of edges to play around with. I like to use the rounded one. With rounded, it'll give each of my characters a little bit of roundedness. Let me change the height of it and see if we can make it look a little bit better. Cool. Almost looks very pillowy. When you do this, however, notice that some of these will move around. So sometimes you get some options that you may not expect. So if you want to, you may want to break these apart a little bit more, or you can keep them the way they are. I'm going to keep it like this. That actually looks kind of cool. We'll say OK to that. And so now this is what I have. I've got my three-dimensional object. However, if I hover over, you can see where all the flat pieces are. Remember, this is an effect. It's taking my two-dimensional objects and it's applying this other effect to it to give me something three-dimensional. So if I move it around, you can still see there's my two-dimensional thing. And if I need to affect one object, I need to use my direct selection tool in order to click on that particular object, so this one, and move it around. And when I move it, you can see now it's being affected behind there. So if I wanted to move my blue piece around, I need to select the flat blue piece. Let's see if I can move it in. See, now it's starting to mess up a little bit. Illustrator is not meant for 3D design, so don't think of this as a true three-dimensional object. I think in the instructions, actually, I ask you to kind of move these away from each other anyway. But I'm showing you how you can play around with it and how you can get it to look a little bit different. Pretty cool. If you wanted to, let's say you wanted each of your pieces to be a little bit taller than the other one. Here's how to do that. I'm just going to make a copy of this one. Let's see, I'll zoom out. Copy it down here. I'm going to bring up my Appearances panel. Notice in my Appearances, there's my 3D Extrude and Bevel. If I wanted to get rid of that, I can click on it, go down to my trash can, and actually get rid of it. So now it's back to normal. If I need each one to be a little bit different, well, they need to be ungrouped. So Object, Ungroup, and then I can apply the effect to each one. I'm going to do this really, really quick. Extrude and Bevel. I'll keep it just not rounded. We'll say none. Turn on my preview so I can see it. We'll say OK. Remember, they're not grouped, so that's why it looks like this. I do need to move them into place. If this one's behind it, what do I need to do? Bring it to the front. It's your stacking order. So that one's good. We'll put this one, that one needs to be in front. This one needs to be in front. All of those. Okay, not too bad. Not too bad at all. And I can play around with how close they are with each other. One at a time. Since they're all the same height, I should be able to line them up relatively close to each other. I'm not going to do too good of a job. The red's off by a little bit. There we go. Now I can place that a little bit better. So to change the height of it, I'm going to select the red one. Watch what happens if I go back up to Extrude and try to do 3D Bevel again. It gives me a warning. It says, hey, you're about to apply another instance of 3D beveling. Do you want to do this, or do you want to just change it up? I don't want to apply it, so don't do that. I want to hit cancel. If I do want to change any of this, instead of going to Filter, go to your Appearances panel and click on this one. This will allow you to change that instance of 3D Extrude. Turn on Preview, and in this case I can start making it taller and say OK. This one, go to 3D, turn on Preview, make it maybe a little bit taller. Go to this one, 3D, Preview, and start adjusting accordingly. Now I will have to go back to each one of them and adjust how their placement on there. We'll say OK to that. Now I can just move these down appropriately. And I get that stair-step kind of effect. Pretty cool. So that's a 3D transformation of a pie graph. No longer do I have a flat one. I can play around with this. I don't like the way those shadows look on that red one, so maybe I would want to open that up and move my light value closer to the front, so now I can see something like that. Hey, if you want two light values, I like the way that's looking on the inside, you can click right here. This will give me another one. Oh, come on. There we go. I'm sorry, right here will give me another one. This one will send it to the back of that, but there's my new one. And now I've got two light sources that I can play around with, lighting the top, one lighting maybe the bottom edge as well. And so you can play with that. Most of this is just playing around, making it look good. Once you've got it three-dimensional, once you've got it the shape, the area to the way you like it, then you start moving things around and adding information to it. On top of this, all I've got to do if I wanted to add my values is get my type tool and start typing out the numbers, provided I remembered where everything is. And then all I've got to do is format those numbers to fit that. Cool? Cool, cool. Okay. Same thing for my three-dimensional pie chart, or bar graph. Now with this one, we're going to break it apart. We're going to do something special with the lighting. Notice how each face isn't just a solid color. I applied a gradient to that particular face. So in this case, I'll make my new one. Say OK. We'll grab our column graph tool, type in some information. I think I wanted this one to be 6 by 4.5. As far as information goes, 25, 100, 150, and 50. Check it off. So now I've got my four different areas. Remember, it's still a live graph right now, but when I go to ungroup it, it gives me this warning saying we need to make it a dead graph. Now we're cool. What I'm going to do with this is not just make the bars three-dimensional, I'm going to make the text three-dimensional as well. So I'm going to drag my text off. When I ungrouped it, I can do that. Just drag that off. We'll save that for later. Each one of these, let's make those three-dimensional. Here's another thing to consider. What do I have around each one of them? Black stroke. If I was to do a 3D bevel now, so Effect, 3D, Extrude, and Bevel, here's the way they look. The edges of them will have a black stroke around it, which isn't exactly what I want. I want the edges to be whatever color the box is. So if you have a stroke around whatever object that you have, the edges of that three-dimensional will be the stroke color, in this case black. Not what I want. Will it cancel? So if I turn off the stroke and apply the bevel, whoop, of course it's been changed up. Now each one is the same color that I'm working with. So let's play around. Turn it to the side. These, I think I want it to be 100. Looking good. Another thing you can play around with is the perspective. If it's set to 0, then your perspective is a nice 2-point kind of deal. If you bring this up, I think in the instructions I say around 38, it'll start to look more 3-point perspective. And you can actually see how it's kind of distorting it a little bit. You can get it too distorted. Right about there seems good. I do want to see my front face, so we'll move my lights around. And let's bring it around this way. Okay, that looks good to me. We'll say okay to that. Alright, so I've got my three-dimensional objects created. As with the other one, when I hover over it, you can see still the two-dimensional value, the little flat values. What I want to do is I want to manipulate the three-dimensional values. So to do this, we don't just need to ungroup it, we need to expand it. So with them selected, I can go to Object, down to Expand Appearance. And this is going to take my two-dimensional information and just expand it out into the three-dimensional information. That's kind of the way of thinking about it. Expand Appearance. Now this is what I've got. Notice that I've got my vector lines going over each little face. I no longer have my two-dimensional information. I can't change it around. They are grouped together, so I'm going to do Shift-Command-G, ungroup it once. When I ungroup it once, now I can move each one of these around. Let's take it a step further. I'm going to ungroup it again, select them, Shift-Command-G. Now I can move the individual faces once they're ungrouped. Figure out, do y'all catch that? Ungroup it once does just the objects. Ungroup it again is the individual faces. Let's colorize it in. Illustrator has some preset gradient colors that I like to use, the bright colors. To find these, if you don't know where they are, under your window, remember you have your swatch libraries. Here's my gradients. And the ones that I'm using are the brights gradients. You can play around with some of the other ones. The metals tends to look really good. I'm just going to stick with bright. And with these, all I'm going to do is apply a gradient to each face. So select a face, and we'll do the same gradient. So this one could be red. Oops, make sure the fill color is selected. There we go. Red face for each one. Uh-oh, had the wrong one selected. Can select each one of these, make that one maybe blue. Select each one of these, make that one green, and we'll do this one as yellow. Pretty cool. If you want to affect the direction of your gradient that you're working with, in this case they're all going from the left side to the right side, you do have a tool, gradient tool, that allows you to select your area. So I can click on this one, and then click and drag and tell it where to start and where to end. All I'm doing is holding down my command key, select it, start and end. That one didn't change too much. Select, and use your gradient tool to change where it starts, where it ends. Same way for this one. Doop, doop. And so now the areas tend to match up. If you do something like that, it just doesn't look right. Play around with it. Make sure your shading areas work out. So there's my three-dimensional type bar graph that I have. Let's apply the same thing to the text that I'm working with. I have this. We'll move it back into here. With it selected, I can go back up to Effect. Rather than go into 3D, if I choose Apply, Extrude, and Bevel, what it's going to do is it remembers the last thing that I did. And so I can actually apply it, and it puts it back into the same perspective. Now, however, there's one thing I needed to change. What's wrong with this? Yeah, it's got too much depth to it. So to change that up, remember, we need to click on here. I'll turn on preview again, and just set my depth to 0. Once it's at 0, we'll click off. Now it's in perspective, but I can actually read it as if it's a flat object. And then from here, all I got to do is move it into place to line up with the area that I'm working with. Pretty cool. You can do three-dimensional transformations to a variety of different things. You can even do it to text. So if I wanted to add a three-dimensional text box to this, we'll just call this Ben's bar chart. Type out your text. I've got it selected. I can go back up to Extrude and Bevel. When I turn on my preview, even the text has that to there. Let's see. And it's all black, so I can't get anything. Let's add a color to it so we can pick it up. Extrude and Bevel. Turn on preview. So now I've got three-dimensionality to that. Sometimes it looks a little hokey. It looks like it's done in Microsoft Word, but you can do that. 3D clip art, yeah. Sometimes, especially if you have a really complex font, like one that looks grungy or it's broken up, it will take a long time to render, and it doesn't give you the best results that you may want to have. I try to keep, I rarely do this kind of stuff to my text. Instead, what I like to do, rather than having it three-dimensional, is just kind of like rotate it this way. Come on. Uh-oh, locking up. There we go. Rotate it around. Like I said, it will take its time about rendering. Give it some three-dimensionality, change up your perspective. Having to really, really think about it. See, now I've got my text going off in this way. It looks three-dimensional. I can put it on a plane. Maybe I would want to keep it to match this particular plane. All I'm doing now. But if I need to go back and change it, it's still highlightable. I can still drag it around and change it. There's my three-dimensional text to add to there. So that's a great little filter. As far as graphic design goes, this is really the only time I've ever used Illustrator's three-dimensional objects. Very, very rare that I have to do that. But you are able to do it within here. You don't have to keep it just with bar graphs or pie graphs. Area charts look really, really snazzy if you want to apply some extrude and bevel to it. So in this case, let's see, I don't want to do that. Let's set it back to the front. Maybe I can rotate it around, add a little depth to it. So now I've got like a 3D mountain range. You will need to change up your lighting source. Light it up. There we go. So now I've got a three-dimensional kind of area graph that I can work with. Works the same for lines. If you draw a line, you apply it to there, now I've got a three-dimensional line graph. Works really good for stacked bar graphs. Apply extrude and bevel, now I've got the three-dimensional stacked bars on top of it to work with there. The thing is, don't just stay with what Illustrator gives you as the default. Play around with the settings to see how you can tweak the areas. If you want to tweak the colors, you'll need to expand it, expand the appearance, and then go back into the individual faces and actually change up from there. That's what we did on this one. Or you can play around with the transparency, the stacking order, and you get effects that look more like this. Pretty cool? Okay, so that's today's exercise. Once you are finished, get started on your personal infographics. Let's see how far you've come for that.